China payout? Hunter Biden allegedly received $250,000 in wire transfers from his Chinese-backed partners in Beijing. This is according to an exclusive report from Fox News Digital published yesterday.
House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer, who's leading the probe on President Biden's involvement in Hunter's business deals, issued a subpoena related to the pair of transfers. In a post on X, he said, quote, Hunter Biden received payments originating from Beijing in 2019 when Joe Biden was running for president. Joe Biden's Delaware home is listed as the beneficiary address for both money wires from China. The White House attorneys for Hunter Biden, meanwhile, and George Mazires did not respond to Fox Digital's request for comment, but the White House has denied the president was ever involved in his son's business ventures. Here to discuss this latest revelation in the House GOP's investigation of Biden is Michael LaRosa, former White House aide and special assistant to First Lady Jill Biden. Welcome back, Michael.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Democrats and those on Team Biden have said repeatedly in response to the Oversight Committee and others that there's no evidence of any wrongdoing on the part of President Biden. Does this not look potentially like evidence of wrongdoing?
No, it doesn't. I don't think it's a secret that Hunter Biden was an investor in the private sector, and he received payment for that work, and the president was a private citizen at the time. So I'm not seeing a crime that this president committed as a private citizen or that his son committed as a private citizen.
So, Michael, I agree that there's certainly no red flag here, but let's call it maybe a little bit of smoke coming out of a smoking gun here, and maybe you can disavow us of that belief. The claim, I think, would be that because Joe Biden was running for president, anybody who wanted to curry influence with the likely future president would have an incentive to do a deal with his son, perhaps paying him more money than his experience or his actual labor would indicate that he deserved. And the fact that the money transfers, the address for the payments was Joe Biden's house, does seem to complicate the narrative from the Biden administration that he had absolutely no involvement, zero involvement with his son's business dealings. At the very least, his address was used to remit these payments. So what do you say to folks that say that at very least that is bad optics for the president?
Again, I mean, there are times when my name is on my mom's address. That doesn't mean she's taking money from me or from my company. And he wasn't. His son was going through a divorce and living at his home. He was also a private investor, and none of that is a secret. So it's still hard to believe that we're going down this rabbit hole still of the president's son and his work and his compensation for it. There's nothing illegal or illicit or unethical about any of that. President Biden was a private citizen at the time. His son was an investor, as were several others, in a Chinese private equity fund.
Can you perhaps clarify what the nature of Hunter Biden's investments were and why he was being paid? Perhaps some clarity around that would help disabuse people of the notion that there's something untoward there, because I do think part of the Ukraine...
It's all very Googleable that Hunter was a partner in a group called Rosemont Seneca. They made investments. One of them was to a private equity company in China, the equivalent to like a Vanguard or a BlackRock here in the United States, an asset manager. And from what I read, Hunter didn't take a stake in the company until after his father left the White House and became a private citizen. And so that's what the wire transfer was for his work with this company, along with many of his partners, which in the United States, Republicans usually cheer on capitalism and entrepreneurialism. I'm a little surprised that this is all that they have found to insinuate. And that's what this is. They're insinuating some kind of tawdriness because he was an investor. I think there's a few other children or children-in-laws of presidents who've been investors as well.
What do you say to that, Spencer? Because it is true that during the Trump administration, there were all kinds of accusations that people were staying at Trump hotels to curry favor with the president, that they were buying Trump steaks and Trump ties, and including in China, China-produced goods to curry favor with the Trump family. He appointed his son-in-law to a diplomatic position, trying to solve peace in the Middle East. His daughter, if I recall correctly, had like an office in the White House. I mean, is this any different from that? Maybe it's all wrong. I certainly would say it's all wrong. But are Republicans barking up the wrong tree when they try to make more of this than they did of Trump's charges of nepotism?
Yeah, it's interesting because, again, there are sort of the parallels that some people see between the previous administration and the current one. But I do think from the White House's perspective, at least on this one, in terms of why Republicans are barking up this tree, is because it does seem like there's kind of blood in the water, right? Because you've had these changing lines from the White House, sort of the official line on the president's relationship with his son and his businesses. The White House says this whole thing is just about a father's love for his son. But then you have the White House line going from President Biden never discussed business with his son Hunter to Joe Biden was never in business with his son Hunter. And it just seems like you cause, very differing realities there.
Yeah, I mean, Michael,
I think it's important to note that it's not the White House it's not only the White House who is saying Hunter's father, the president, has never done business or talked about business with his son. It's Hunter Biden's own business partner who testified before Mr. Comer's committee who said the same thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, to that point, Michael, this is what is frustrating. It does feel like a little bit of a problem of Biden's own creation, because I would argue that if Joe Biden had said, oh, occasionally I let my son use my address to collect his checks, or occasionally I would say hello to his business partners. I knew who they were. We've had dinner together. They're friends of my son, but I was never involved in any of his business dealings, and also made very clear to my son that he shouldn't hold me out as having any influence because that would be unethical and illegal. Then he would be in a better rhetorical position right now. But because he said, I have no knowledge of, I'm paraphrasing here, but I'm completely unaware of, when there is even incremental evidence that he had some involvement, it makes him look kind of categorically like he's not telling the truth.
I understand completely what you're saying, but we should be crystal clear about it. Involvement. You used the word involvement. There was no involvement in Hunter's work. Okay? If Hunter was paid for services and he gave his father a Christmas gift, is that trafficking off of his father's name? Or did Joe Biden benefit from Hunter's work? Is that what we're saying here? Or are we talking about the times where Joe Biden said hello at Cafe Milano when he was there for a World Food Program meeting? Again, there's no evidence of an involvement. And to go back to your point, Bree, when Joe Biden, Hunter Biden was the first to admit back in April of 2019, if he had to do it all over again, had I known I would have been a political target, I probably would not have done X, Y, and but it was not illegal. It was not unethical. And it's interesting that Mr. Comer thinks they're going to find something that for 5 years the Department of Justice and President Trump's own prosecutors couldn't find.
I do think that that's a strong point, that there have been ongoing investigations, including under a Trump DOJ, that doesn't seem to have turned up more than these kinds of insinuations of, let's call it, bad optics, the kind of typical nepotism that perhaps doesn't raise to the level of something that would require impeachment, et cetera. I want you to have the last word to weigh in here, Spencer.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Obviously, this has been sort of a drip, drip, drip investigation on the part of House Republicans. And I would say that just because initially sort of the there was not apparent in the there of this situation doesn't mean that they haven't found more, obviously. This is not an investigation that's running on without fuel to run on. They're continually getting these suspicious activity reports from banks. They're getting more details. They're getting these banking records. And it does seem like, again, to your point, that it's just creating this appearance that there may have been something wrong there by being sort of so absolute and then it not turning out to be that way.
I do think some of that is wishful thinking. Even the IRS alleged whistleblowers, their testimony has now been contradicted by senior level IRS officials and senior level FBI agents, and David Weiss, who was appointed by President Trump. There's really, and we should be clear about this, we're not talking about anything that the president has done. We're talking about his son, private citizen, who never campaigned for his father, never raised money for his father, never appeared in a commercial for his father, didn't even come to the convention for his father. We should be very clear about the differences between this presidential child and the previous ones who actually played a policy-making role in the White House.
Yeah, I do think, Michael, that even if it is the case that Hunter Biden was holding out his father for an influence peddling scheme, Republicans still do have to prove that Joe Biden knew about it and participated in that influence peddling scheme and, benefited from it. So I take your point. Thank you so much for joining us again, Michael.
You're welcome.
More Rising for you right after this. Stick around.